I blocked my sister because she used my trauma for content. For years, I was the flexible one, the one who adapted, not by choice, but because speaking up meant being dramatic. My sister? She was the loud, confident one. When she spoke, people listened. When I did, I was told I was wrong about my own feelings. That difference shaped our entire childhood, but it exploded when she decided our past was perfect content for her social media empire. I, 34F, have always been the flexible one in my family. Not because I wanted to be, but because it was easier to adjust than to argue. If plans changed, I adapted. If someone needed help, I showed up. If I was uncomfortable, I kept it to myself because every time I didn't, I was told I was being dramatic, sensitive, or difficult. My sister, Brielle, 37F, has always been the opposite. She's confident, loud, very sure of herself, and very good at steering conversations. When she talks, people listen. When I talk, people tend to explain to me why I'm wrong about my own feelings. Growing up, that difference mattered. If Brielle argued with our parents, it was standing up for herself. If I argued, it was talking back. If Brielle messed up, it was stress or pressure. If I messed up, it was attitude. Brielle remembers our childhood as strict but fair, chaotic but loving, everyone doing their best. She tells stories about it like it was messy but funny. I remember walking on eggshells and trying to stay invisible so I wouldn't become the target of whatever mood was happening that day. We don't remember things the same way, and I stopped trying to convince her otherwise years ago because it never went anywhere except me getting told I was exaggerating. What brought everything back wasn't a family dinner or a holiday or some big emotional talk. It was her social media. Brielle runs a lifestyle account on Instagram. It started small and then slowly grew. Now she gets some brand deals and takes it seriously. She posts about routines, habits, motivation, real life, that kind of thing. A few months ago, she started doing these storytime videos about family moments that shaped me. At first, it was harmless stuff, old photos, talking about being competitive as kids. Nothing that bothered me. Then the stories started shifting. She posted one about how I used to cry when I got in trouble and how she had to be the mature one because I was too emotional to handle consequences. People in the comments were laughing and calling me dramatic even though she never used my name. Another time, she talked about how she learned responsibility early because she couldn't rely on certain people to pull their weight, while showing childhood photos where it was very obvious who she was talking about. People who know us knew it was about me. I started getting messages like, "LOL, that story about you is wild," and "Were you really that bad as a kid?" I messaged her privately and told her I wasn't okay with being turned into content. She replied with, "I didn't say your name. I said it didn't matter. Everyone knows." She said, "You're reading into it." I said, "No, you're talking about me like I'm a character." She said, "It's my childhood too." I said, "It's my childhood being used to make you look good." She sent back, "Wow, okay. I guess I can't share my life now." I told her that wasn't what I said, and she knew it. She left me on read. A few days later, she posted another video about siblings who rewrite the past to avoid accountability, and how some people turn normal discipline into trauma because it's trendy to be a victim. That one wasn't subtle at all. I messaged her again and said, "So now you're just saying it out loud." She replied, "If the shoe fits." I said, "You are being cruel on purpose." She said, "No, I'm being honest and you hate that." I said, "You're being public." She said, "You don't get to control what I talk about." I said, "You don't get to build your image by dragging me." She told me I was trying to silence her. I told her she was trying to rewrite me. She said, "God, you always do this. Everything is about you." I said, "You literally made it about me and put it online." She said, "People relate to my stories. That should tell you something." I said, "It tells me you like the attention more than you care how I feel." She replied, "Or maybe people finally see what I had to deal with." That pissed me off, and I told her exactly that. I said, "You didn't deal with me. You watched while I got blamed, and you stayed quiet because it worked for you." She said, "There it is. Blame everyone else." I said, "You're not innocent in this." She said, "I was a kid too. Stop acting like I was some villain." I said, "Then stop acting like you were some hero." She said, "You seriously need to grow up." I said, "You seriously need to stop using me for engagement." That's when she sent the message that completely changed how I see her. She said, "You should be grateful. We weren't abused. We were raised. You weren't mistreated. You were corrected. Some people had it way worse, and you act like you survived something." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I said, "Do not tell me to be grateful for being humiliated and blamed for things I didn't do." She said, "Here we go, rewriting history again." I said, "You don't get to decide what hurt me." She said, "You love playing the victim." them. I said, you love pretending nothing mattered unless it happened to you. She said, you've always needed extra sympathy. I said, you've always needed to be right. She said, you're exhausting. I said, and you're heartless. She said, at least I don't live in the past. I said, at least I don't monetize it. She said, maybe if you weren't so sensitive, you wouldn't still be mad. I said, maybe if you weren't so arrogant, you'd realize not everything was fine. Then she sent a voice message, not crying, not emotional, cold and annoyed. She said I should be thanking her for keeping things vague online. She said she could have told way worse stories about me. She said she made me sound quirky instead of irresponsible. She said if I didn't like how I was portrayed, I should have behaved better growing up. She said I was lucky she didn't embarrass me more. I lost it. I texted back that she was disgusting for talking about me like she owned my reputation. She said I was unhinged. I said she was manipulative. She said I was jealous that she turned our childhood into something useful. I said she turned it into content, not truth. She said I just hated that people believed her. I said I hated that she enjoyed putting me down. She said, you always ruin everything with your negativity. I said, you always ruin everything with your ego. She said, this is why nobody can have honest conversations with you. I said, this is why nobody feels safe around you. She said, you're proving exactly what I talk about online. I said, and you're proving you don't care who you step on as long as you get applause. After that, I told her to stop messaging me. She replied, so now you're running away. I said, no, I'm done being your storyline. She said, you're choosing to blow up our relationship. I said, you blew it up when you told me to be grateful for being treated like trash. She replied, there you go, exaggerating again. I blocked her. I didn't post about it. I didn't announce anything. I just blocked her. She noticed, and she did not handle it quietly. She started posting about outgrowing people who stay stuck in victim mode. She posted quotes about choosing growth over emotional chaos. She replied to comments about cutting off negative family members. People started messaging me asking what happened, asking if I was okay, asking if I did something to hurt her. I didn't respond to any of them. Then relatives started reaching out, saying Brielle was upset and confused, and that I should talk to her instead of making things awkward. I told them I wasn't discussing my childhood with someone who treats it like marketing material. They said she didn't mean to hurt me. I said she meant every word she said to me. They said I was overreacting and taking things too personally. I said, it was personal. It was literally about me. Then Brielle emailed me, not to apologize, to explain. She wrote a long message about how she thinks I remember things wrong, how she feels attacked for sharing her truth, how my silence is damaging her mental health, how I'm punishing her for being successful, how she's always been there for me even when I was difficult. She said I should reconsider cutting her off because family doesn't do this to each other. Update 1. Instead of coming at me directly, she started sending people. The first one was my cousin Jade. She texted me out of nowhere and said Brielle was really stressed and that I should at least talk to her because social media isn't real life. I told Jade social media became real life the second Brielle started turning my childhood into posts and captions. Jade said Brielle never mentioned my name. I said she used stories that only happened to me with details nobody else would recognize unless they knew us. Jade said I was reading into it. I said, no, I'm reading it exactly as written. Jade told me Brielle feels like I'm trying to sabotage her page. I said Brielle sabotaged herself when she decided my past was her brand. Jade said, I always take things personally. I told her, it is personal when it's literally about me. Jade said Brielle just wants to tell her story. I said, then she should tell her story, not mine with better lighting. Jade said I was being harsh. I told her she was being naive. That conversation ended with her saying, I just don't want this to tear the family apart, and me saying, then maybe stop carrying messages for the person doing the tearing. Then my Aunt Serena messaged me on Facebook, not about feelings, about image. She said people were starting to notice tension and that it was making things awkward. She said Brielle was upset and confused and that I should clear the air for everyone's sake. I told her I already cleared the air with Brielle and she told me I should be grateful for how I was treated. Serena said Brielle didn't mean it that way. I said Brielle said it in plain language. Serena said I always focus on wording instead of intention. I said said intention doesn't erase impact. Serena said I was being dramatic. I told her, you weren't there. Don't narrate something you didn't live. She replied, you always push people away when things get uncomfortable. I said, and you always protect the loudest person in the room. She left me on read after that. 2 days later, Brielle sent me a follow request from a second account. No message, no apology, just the request sitting there like a test. I didn't accept it. The next day I got another email from her, and this one wasn't pretending to be calm. She said my silence was damaging her reputation. She said people were asking questions and she didn't know what to tell them. She said I was forcing her to defend herself over things that happened years ago. She said I was punishing her instead of talking it out. I replied with one sentence, stop talking about me online and you won't need to defend anything. She responded almost immediately. She said I was trying to control her content. She said I don't get to decide what she talks about. She said my silence was manipulative and that I was using it to make her look guilty. I said we already talked and she told me to be grateful. She said she told me to be realistic. I said she told me my childhood didn't count. She said she told me to stop exaggerating. I said she told me therapy made me hypersensitive. She said I twist everything. I said she edits everything. That's when she changed tactics again. She stopped posting about siblings. Now she started posting about supporting creators who speak their truth even when family tries to silence them. People were commenting stuff like protect your peace and toxic relatives hate accountability. Someone tagged me in one of her comments and wrote, hope your sister gets the help she needs. That one actually made me mad. I messaged Brielle and told her to stop letting people talk about me in her comments. She said she can't control what people say. I said she controls what she posts. She said I could mute the comments if they bother me. I said I already blocked you. She said that proves I'm running from conversation. I said it proves I'm done being your storyline. Then she did something that felt very calculated. She sent a long message in the family group chat, not naming me, just talking about how painful it is when people abandon you and pretend they're protecting themselves when they're really avoiding accountability, about how some people rewrite history to avoid responsibility for their own behavior, about how she's tired of being punished for telling the truth. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. My Uncle Ray messaged me privately and said I should stop acting like I'm better than everyone. I told him I never said that. He said my silence says it. I told him silence isn't arrogance, it's exhaustion. He said I was being cold. I told him I wasn't here to perform reconciliation for other people's comfort. Then my Aunt Serena jumped into the group chat and said everyone needs to stop and that family shouldn't be fighting like this. Brielle replied and said she wasn't fighting, she was expressing how hurt she was. I said, you're expressing it publicly and pretending it's not about me. Brielle said I was misrepresenting her. I said, you sent this to the family chat. Who exactly did you think would read it? She said she never denied my feelings. She just thinks I exaggerate. I said, you told me I should be grateful. She said, for having parents who tried. I said, don't repackage it now. She said, I always twist things to make myself the victim. I said, you're twisting right now. She said, I need to stop dragging private conversations into public spaces. I said, you started posting about me weeks ago. She said she was sharing her growth. I said, your growth shouldn't be built on my childhood. Then Jade jumped in and said everyone should calm down and stop attacking Brielle. I said, I'm not attacking her. I'm responding to what she keeps saying about me. Brielle said she was calm until I started accusing her of things. I said, you called me ungrateful, dramatic, and said therapy messed with my head. Don't pretend this is about tone. She said, I said therapy made you hypersensitive. I said, that's not better. She said, this is exactly what I mean. Everything turns into a crisis with you. I said, and everything turns into content with you. Before I tell you what happened in this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment and tell us what you think about the story and how you would react. I want to hear your thoughts. Then she sent a voice message into the group chat, not crying, not shaky, controlled and annoyed. She said she's tired of being painted as some villain when she's the one who held things together growing up. She said while I was shutting down, she was stepping up. She said she protected me from more than I even know. She said I should appreciate that instead of rewriting history like she was the problem. I typed back, so now you're the hero and I'm the problem. She replied, I'm the one who took responsibility. I said, no, you took control. She said, same thing. I said, not even close. Then she said, honestly, you wouldn't survive without people covering for you. That one hit hard, and I didn't hold back. I said, you didn't cover for me. You benefited from me being the quiet one while you played favorite. She said, that's your narrative. I said, and this is your brand strategy. She said, at least I turned our past into something useful. I said, you turned it into attention. She said, and you turned it into excuses. Then my Uncle Ray said I was being disrespectful and should stop attacking my sister when she's trying to be honest. I told him, honest doesn't mean untouchable. He said I always have to make things ugly. I told him, things were ugly. You just didn't have to look at them. At that point, I muted the chat because it was just piling on. Later that night, Brielle emailed me again. Short, sharp. She said if I didn't respond and clear things up with the family, she would tell her side fully so people wouldn't think she did something wrong. She said she wasn't going to let me control the narrative by staying silent. I replied, do whatever you want. I'm not participating in this. She replied, then don't complain when people believe me. I didn't answer. The next morning, she went live on Instagram, not saying my name, but talking about being attacked by people who can't handle truth, about family members who build their identity around being wronged, about how hard it is when you outgrow people who want to stay stuck in victimhood. Update 2. I got an email from a brand account. Not a fan, not a relative, a brand. They said they were reaching out because they'd seen Brielle's recent content about family trauma and setting boundaries, and they wanted to confirm that any people mentioned in her stories had given consent because their partnership guidelines required it if personal stories were being monetized. I stared at that email for a long time before replying. I didn't give them details. I didn't explain my childhood. I didn't even mention the fight. I just said, I have not given consent for my experiences or identity to be used in any sponsored or promotional content. They replied and said thank you for clarifying and that they'd follow up internally. I didn't tell anyone I did that. Not my cousin, not my aunt, not Brielle. 2 days later, Brielle's stories changed. No more vague sibling posts. No more trauma captions. Just product links and lifestyle stuff like nothing happened. Then Jade messaged me and said Brielle was freaking out because a partnership got paused for review and she didn't know why. I told Jade I didn't know either. That was true. I didn't know what they told Brielle. I only knew what I said. Later that night, Brielle finally messaged me directly from the second account. Not angry, panicked. She asked if I contacted her sponsors. She said if I did, that was crossing a line. She said I was trying to ruin her income because I couldn't handle criticism. I replied, I answered a question I was asked. That's it. She said I should have come to her instead of going behind her back. I said, you went public before you ever came to me. She said I was trying to punish her professionally. I said, you made my personal life part of your professional content. She said I knew what I was doing. I said, so did you? Then she sent another voice message, and this one wasn't controlled. She said I was jealous. She said I always hated that people listened to her. She said I couldn't stand that she turned our past into something people cared about. She said I was trying to drag her down because I never did anything with my own life that people wanted to hear about. I didn't sugarcoat my response. I told her, you don't get attention for surviving. You get attention for packaging it. And you packaged me without asking. She said, so now I'm a villain for telling the truth? I said, you're a problem for deciding my story was yours to sell. She said I was trying to control her. I said, no, I'm refusing to be your material. She said if I had just stayed quiet, none of this would have happened. I said, that's the whole problem. You expected me to. She didn't reply after that, but she didn't stay quiet either. Instead of posting, she started talking to relatives. Jade told me Brielle was telling people I went after her sponsors to sabotage her. Serena told me Brielle said I was trying to punish her for speaking honestly. Ray told me I was being extreme and that business problems shouldn't be dragged into family drama. I told Ray, family drama was already in her business. He said I could have handled it privately. I said she didn't. He said I was making things worse. I said she made them public first. Then Brielle sent another email, not to apologize, to threaten. She said if I didn't stop interfering with her work, she would explain to people exactly why I was so unstable growing up and how much she supposedly covered for me. She said she had stories too, and she was tired of protecting me. I didn't reply to that email either. I forwarded it, not to family, to the same brand email thread that had contacted me earlier. I wrote, this is the person you asked about consent. This message was sent today. I didn't add commentary. I didn't explain context. I just attached it. After that, things moved fast and slow at the same time. Fast online, slow in real life. Brielle stopped posting for almost a week. When she came back, it was only ads ads and neutral content. No stories. No personal posts. No family references. Then Serena called me, not TL, to tell me Brielle was having a really hard time and that some partnerships were on hold and that maybe I could fix this if I wanted to. I told her I didn't break anything. She said Brielle felt attacked. I said Brielle attacked first. She said Brielle is stressed. I said, so am I. She said, do you really want this to be how things end between you two? I said, she already decided that when she told me to be grateful for being treated badly. Serena said I was holding on to anger. I said, no, I'm holding on to boundaries. She said I'm punishing Brielle. I said, I'm not participating in her career. Then Jade texted and said Brielle was crying, saying I ruined everything for her and that I always wanted to see her fail. I replied, I wanted to be left out of it. Jade said I could have just ignored the posts. I said, I did, until people started messaging me. Jade said Brielle feels betrayed. I said, so did I. Then Brielle finally sent me one last message. Not angry, not loud, cold. She said, I hope it was worth it. I replied, I hope you stop using me. She didn't respond. And here's the part that surprised me. She didn't escalate again. No more vague posts. No more family group chat speeches. No more emails. But she also didn't apologize. She just cut me out of her content completely. Like I never existed. Relatives stopped messaging me after a while. Not because things were resolved, but because there was nothing new to argue about. The tension didn't explode into some big family collapse. It just hardened. Now, when there are family events, I hear about them after they happen. No one tells me not to come. They just don't tell me when. Brielle still has her page. Still posts, still has followers, but my name never comes up, and I'm not reaching out. The end. Brielle, narcissistic content vampire who turned your childhood trauma into her relatable brand, then gaslit you with be grateful you weren't abused, just corrected, while crying sabotage when her sponsors sniffed the non-consent. Classic main character syndrome plus flying monkey family enablers who hate confrontation more than they hate her stepping on you. Finally said fuck this after years of being the scapegoat, blocked her, answered one honest consent question from a brand, forwarded her threats, and refused to be free PR material. Boundaries, not revenge. Verdict, NTA. Not even a little. She made your pain her paycheck. You made her stop. End of story. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite.